day of October of the year that'll never end, 2020. And as Tim pointed out to me when we chatted yesterday, or Joe, it's a blur. You know, the gifts keep on giving with the big earthquake off the Alaska coast. So.
No tsunami. Got to look on the bright side.
Yes, yep. Thank goodness.
Right. Okay, so on the top of the list is agenda priorities for lobbying Salem. Joe.
Yeah, so let me get this started, but I'm going to quickly turn it over to Tess and our friends from CFM. So this will be the first long session in 2021 for the city of Sherwood to have the benefit of CFM advocates working on our behalf down in Salem. So we've not done this in the past because we didn't have the benefit of CFM at the state level. And so I wanted to have Tess and the folks from CFM do a quick presentation about who they are. Some of the counselors have met them. Some of you have not had a chance to meet the CFM team. Talk about what they're seeing for the long session, and then more specifically get into some priorities that the council wants them to focus on in the 2021 session. The ultimate goal is a document, kind of a City of Sherwood City Council 2021 legislative priority report that you can possibly approve if you want to at a future council meeting as a resolution. It'd be a very public document in terms of Sherwood citizens knowing kind of what the priorities are for the Sherwood City Council down in Salem. So that's the purpose of tonight. We have the flexibility of no business meeting, so we're not under a time crunch, and Tess and her team really want to hear from the councilors. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tess, and you can go from there. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And Joe, and thank you all for helping us. We're excited to be here today and get to know you all a little bit better. I am just going to start my PowerPoint. Can you please just let me know that it's working?
We are not.
There it goes.
You guys can see it?
It's coming.
Okay. Well, just so you know, it does seem like you guys are able to skip ahead on the PowerPoint, and then you can always come back to where we are. Hopefully most of you saw this over the weekend. It was sent out. So CFM advocates, we are really excited to be working with you all and helping you with state lobbying. And this is my agenda that I'm hoping for all of us to go through tonight. Really just wanted to kick it off. I'm hoping that we'll go around and do a round of introductions. I have a couple of questions for you all. And then, at CFM, we'll talk about who we are and what we're doing. We'll give you a legislative overview that's going to be pretty detailed about what's going on now and what we're expecting for the 2021 session. And then we want to talk about current issues, things that we've already been working on, things that LOC has decided that are their priorities, things like that. And then and Sherwood has chosen 4 priorities already in the LOC survey. So we want to talk about that and build on that as we work to create a policy document like Joe described. So I'm hoping that we can go around first and just, if you wouldn't mind, so we can just kind of see everyone who's here. I know I can only see a certain amount of people at any given time. So I'd love to hear from everyone. One, your name, obviously, and how long you've been on city council or in the mayoral seat. And then please tell us about any experience you've had just at the state capitol, and that's just kind of for fun. If you haven't had any experience, that's fine too. Just trying to gauge where everyone's at and what kind of interactions they've had at the capitol before. So I'm just going to pull down this real quick. And see if we can go through. So can we start with Mayor Mays? Will you help me kick this off?
My pleasure, Tess. Thank you. Glad to have you. Great to be able to have you guys on board for the long session, advocating for our community. Keith Mays, currently the mayor. I've been elected for on either city council or mayor for most of the last 20 years, 15 of the last 20 years. So I got first elected in November of 01 on council, and then did 4 years as that, and then 8 years as mayor, and then 3. So that might add up to 15. Let's see. So I've been to Salem many times. I've never got lost in the buildings. I think I've lost my car once or twice. But yeah, that's about it. Been to the governor's office a couple times. I don't know. Watched a session from the rafters a few times.
Yeah. And I know I made you present one time in front of a committee, so that happened. You did that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Threw my feet to the fire of the wolves. But we were successful in getting some support that we need to get once again.
That's right.
So that's me.
Great. Councillor Rosner, I can see you're on.
Let's see. I've been sworn in 3 times now, but I've only been on council for coming up on 3 years, believe it or not. So that's a story for another time. But I've made several trips down to Salem. I've been working with the League of Oregon Cities on their legislative committees. You and I got to spend a whole day together doing speed dating with all the representatives and senators down there as we're lobbying for funding for the pedestrian bridge. And I'll just use this as an opportunity to just thank you and your team. You guys did an amazing job on that. Made the process of going down and working through all of those folks in Salem to get that money really paid off, and really appreciated all your help with that. And I think you also made me testify.
I did.
Once or twice.
Mhm.
Yes. But you made it easy. The prep was great. So thank you.
Councillor Griffin.
Let's see. Like Councillor Rosner, I have been on council 3 times. It's odd, but 2 and almost coming up the same as Tim, about almost 3 years. And I have been through Salem. I drive through it as quickly as I possibly can on my way to whatever's on the other side. I've been in the Capitol building, but I haven't really, been, engaged like, Tim and the mayor have been engaged. I have emailed, though. I've emailed my representative several times and tried to stay up on the CFM letter, the updates that you send to us, Tess. I read through those. I don't always understand. Sometimes I have to email Joe and I have to say, what does this acronym stand for? And he translates. But I also try to keep up to speed as much as I possibly can. But, oh my gosh, it's a moving landscape. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. And let us know if we use any acronyms today that you need.
Yeah, all right.
We are known to do that. How about Councillor Brose? Am I saying that right?
Browse, as in mouse. No worries. So let's see. This is my 2nd partial term. So I think altogether, when I complete it, there'll be 5 years on council. I have done some lobbying back in, I think it was 2015. I was on the Transportation Committee, the Community Services Committee, if I remember correctly. I was on two different committees back then. I have visited a number of the representatives, and I have spoken at the LOC conference in Salem. So pretty familiar with Salem.
Perfect. Thank you. That's awesome. Councillor Young?
Yes. Hi. I have been on council almost 4 years. The end of my term is coming up the end of this year, and hoping to serve another 4 years after the November 3rd election. I went to Salem once, and that was with Councillor Rosner and Mayor Mays when we were advocating for funds for the pedestrian bridge. And I have sent in lots of multiple testimonies. one or two since being on council, but prior to that, I sent in quite a bit advocating for charter schools and charter school funding. So I'm familiar with that aspect as far as presenting testimony, written testimony for the record on items. So that's where I'm at.
That's great. Okay, Councillor Garland.
Hello. I don't know that I've met all of you before, so yeah, I'm like him, also serving out the end of my first term, elected in November of 2016, up for re-election, hoping to get re-elected again. I actually worked in Salem. I worked for the Oregon Health Authority as a senior project manager. So pre-pandemic, I was down there every day. Used to work at the HSB building right on Summer Street, right near the Capitol, within 2 blocks of the Capitol. So I've had the opportunity to meet with our representative Neron on multiple occasions down there in the Capitol, and admittedly got a little starstruck the first time I was walking down the long, narrow hallway. I'm like, oh, I've seen that person's picture and that representative's picture. I'm like, you're an actual person in person. So that was kind of fun. Yeah, my favorite thing to do down in Salem is go there for the Christmas caroling, where all the students come down there and they fill the lobby with the tree, and that's just such a great sight. So yeah, I've actually shadowed Council President Rosner on, I think it was the HB 2001. We were down there. He was testifying, and I sat in the crowd as moral support for that. And yeah, just working with our Representative Neron and submitting some testimony, written testimony as well on a few bills. And then with my work, the Oregon Health Authority, I work with actually the Legislative Financial Office quite a bit, doing some of our budget work within our project management group on submitting budgets and trying to get projects approved. So I kind of have a little bit of that aspect of dealing with the Capitol as well in my professional life. That's it for me.
Fascinating. Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, hi. So Doug Scott. So I've been on council almost 2 years now, so I'm the most junior member. Prior to that, I served on the Planning Commission and some other boards and commissions and school board work groups over the years. I have not been to Salem for any legislative matters, so no experience there to speak of.
Yeah, that's fun too. Well, we're gonna start at the basic level of describing these things. So, stop us if you need anything, but I kind of feel like you'll get it by the end. We'll teach you everything you need to know. Is there any, Joe, anyone else you want to help me introduce is there anyone else on that we need to talk with?
No, I think it was mostly the council members.
Great. Okay. Well, so nice to meet all of you, many of you for the first time. So again, thank you for having us here. I'm going to go back to sharing my PowerPoint here. And then I want us to talk about ourselves so you can get to know CFM. So give me 1 second. I do want to just quickly touch on the fact that, today we have kind of 2 goals. We want to give you a detailed overview of the legislature and also and where it stands today and what we're expecting for 2021, and also just give you some background on CFM and what we're doing and what we're planning on doing and how we're going to help Sherwood for this coming session. And then we also, again, we've talked about this, but we want to do up to 10 priority issues on a priority document that will kind of guide us as we're going to lobby for the city. So are there any questions on either of those? So yeah, so we're all here tonight, your state lobby team. Obviously, Tess Milio, I am the lead lobbyist for the city of Sherwood, and Zach Reeves helps me with this work on this account, and Dale is there more as he's our boss, and he also is there to help fill in when we need. But you're going to primarily be working with me and Zach, for the session. We do have exciting news. We have a new colleague coming on. You're going to see an announcement about that tomorrow, starting on November 1st. His name is Waylon Buchan, and he's with the Oregon Truckers Association. So we're really excited about that. He's going to join us and provide some great contacts. And he has a lot of history working with a lot of different legislators. So we think he's going to be a real asset. So the team is only expanding. but just so you know a little bit about us, I started, I grew up in Pasadena, California. I went to Willamette University. That's what brought me to Oregon. Pretty much been here ever since. While I was studying politics and art studio at Willamette, I was interning across the street at the state capitol. I worked as an intern for Rep. Tobias Reed and then for Rep. Brent Barton in 2007 and 2009 sessions. I then graduated, moved down to San Francisco for a short stint as doing campaign work, and then I moved back to Oregon for more campaign work. And then in the 2011 session, I worked for both Phil Barnhart and Nancy Nathanson. Representative Nathanson is the current revenue chair. And then after that, I got a job lobbying in 2013 with CFM, and I've been with the firm ever since. And we have a large array of clients. We tend to have about 20 clients going into any given session. They stay largely the same. And you can tell that our team breaks it up a little bit, but we all also do like to stay coordinated on it. So we will keep each other posted, and we do talk a lot during the session. Normally it's in person. You'll hear about what we're thinking is going to happen this round, but yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'll say that, so we also represent the city of Eugene, which Zach and I work on also. So we have other city experience. We worked for the city of Salem before that. And as you know, our federal team, who also represents the city of Sherwood, has a ton of city clients as well. So it's one of our favorite things. Yeah, so maybe I'll turn it over. Zach, do you want to talk a little bit? And then I can turn it to Dale.
Sure. Gotta get myself off mute here. So as Tess said, I'm Zach Reeves. I am for about 10 days or so the newest member of CFM. I've been here since early 2017. So what's that? Almost 3.5 years. I much like Tess, I started in the legislature working for various legislators, both on the House and the Senate side. I actually got into the legislature getting my master's at OSU. I should say, I guess I'm from Corvallis, born and raised. Went to Willamette, as did Tess, for my undergraduate. Didn't have a lick of interest in politics, even though I went to school for 4 years across the street from the Capitol. I don't think I set foot on the Capitol grounds once in 4 years. Moved to New Zealand for a few years, worked there and traveled there, would move back there in a heartbeat, especially right now, given the circumstances. But came back, got my master's, and got a fellowship working in the legislature in the 2011 session, and enjoyed every second of it. I love the fast-paced environment. Every day is different, and get to work on things that, whether the general public is aware of it or not, are vastly influential in how people live and work and experience Oregon. So joined CFM in 2017 and have most of my experience working for legislators has been in the transportation sector. Like Tess said, we do a lot of work in municipal governments now. We also represent the city of Vancouver, Washington, in the state, at the state level, doing, their main concerns are not as broad as an Oregon city, but, just another municipal government that we are working for. So I will keep it brief and pass it over to Dale.
All right. Well, thank you again for having all three of us here. So again, my name is Dale Penn. I'm the State Affairs Partner. Myself and Joel Rubin, who many of you may have interacted with. He runs the Federal Affairs section of CFM. We represent the two senior partners of the firm, him on the federal side, me on the state side. I got started in the legislature back in 2005 after college. I went to school out of state at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm born and raised here in Salem, Oregon. I always knew I wanted to do something with politics, and I just didn't know what. Came back and was lucky enough to work for the Judiciary Committee at the time. We tackled in the 05 session methamphetamine use and a whole bunch of other issues. And from there, got a job running government regulatory affairs for a large healthcare company, and then really focused on healthcare, business, and really human services, health and human services since then. As Tess had mentioned, we have a wide, diverse range of clients. Most lobby firms will, because you want to make sure that you avoid conflicts. But one of the areas that I really focus on is around healthcare. So I represent, I'm lead lobbyist for a couple of our big clients, Providence Health and Services and Peace Health, two big healthcare entities based out of Vancouver, Lane, and all over the state with Providence. You know, I love the budget process, which is a whole nother bag of cats in the legislature. You've got your policy work, and then you've got your budget work. So you've got all these great ideas. Let's go pass a bill. Well, wait a minute, how are you going to pay for it? And so that's, you know, one of my proudest moments recently at the legislature was in my volunteer time. I am a Rotarian down in Salem at the Rotary Club of Salem. And we worked with a couple of the other lobbyists in our crew to get $1 million 2 years ago for our Centennial Project, which is a Rotary amphitheater down in Salem. So I led the effort to work with one or two other lobbyists in the company, or in the other Rotarians, to secure that money, and we're breaking ground over the next few weeks. So it's something that, you know, I'm an advocate both for my work and also for my personal life. So thank you again for having us, and I'm happy to answer any questions or whatnot you have about the firm, which itself was created in 1990. So we're one of the older firms providing services, both state and federal, in Oregon. And several of the initial partners who created the firm are still involved as they edge their way to retirement or have been retired. So again, I'll answer any questions you may have, and again, really appreciate you having us here.
All right, great. Thank you all. Does anyone have any questions before we move on about our backgrounds or anything?
No, that was good. But if there's another person, if the newbie is also a Willamette grad, I'm going to file a complaint.
Oh, no.
So, you know, as a Linfield grad.
Yeah.
Okay, now, moving on.
Well, thankfully, I didn't go to Willamette, so there you go. There's a little bit right there.
Yeah, he just lives near Salem now. He's in Kaiser.
He went to Western Oregon. He went to Western Oregon for undergrad, so there you go.
That's true. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the legislative makeup. So this might be a little basic for some of you out there, but I do want to just kind of start at the bottom, just to, like, make sure everyone is on the same page. So Oregon legislature, there are 90 members in the legislature. There are 30 in the Senate and 60 in the House. Each Senate district is comprised of 2 House districts. Right here on this slide, I have listed all of the leadership. There's more leadership, but these are the main: majority leader, minority leader, and then the leader who is elected at large from all of the members, both Republicans and Democrats, are the Speaker of the House and the Senate President. We're in a position right now where the Speaker of the House and the Senate President have been around for a long time. So they know what they're doing, and they've been there a long time. There is, we're going to watch how this election plays out, and there are some rumors about that changing, but, for the most part, those are pretty unsubstantiated. And we do expect that they will still be in charge in 2021. So we have Barbara Smith Warner, who is a Democrat. I live in her district, actually, up here in Portland. And then we have Minority Leader Christine Drazen out of Canby. She's pretty new. And then in the Senate, we have Rob Wagner, who's also pretty new to his role. He's a former lobbyist from Lake Oswego, who recently became a senator about 2 years ago, but he's risen up quickly. And then Republican leader Fred Girod just took over for Senator Bart Sugar. So they've had quite a bit of changeover in the last couple years.
I'll just add one thing just quickly. We're going to go into some other issues later on about some of the big issues facing the legislature. The one thing I'll add is Senator Fred Girod down in state and was an individual who lost his home in the wildfire down in the Beachy Creek fire. So it's just something to keep in mind as we're talking about issues that are important to legislators. That's hitting really close to home right now.
Yeah, literally hitting home for some of these folks.
Hey, Tess, this is Tim. A quick question.
Yeah, Tim.
I would agree. I would suspect that the Dems are going to stay in power down there. Is there any scuttlebutt about whether they'll maintain their supermajority, though?
Yes, that's what I want to talk about next. So perfect.
That was not planned.
Yeah. So as you can see on this slide, this is the current makeup of the parties. So Democrats do have supermajorities in both. It's 36 is a supermajority in the House and 18 is a supermajority in the Senate. So you can see that they're just at the 18 supermajority for the Senate. There are 3 Senate races that are, in play, as they would say right now. They are Senator Tim Knopp, who's been there a long time. He's out in Bend. Obviously, with a lot of people moving to Bend, that district has become more and more blue over time, and which is one of the reasons, he was hesitant to walk and, has to watch out for his base. But it does look like he is likely to, what we're hearing is he's likely to come through and beat challenger Eileen Kiley. But you know what? We don't want to make these predictions too strong because these are swing seats. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens on November 3rd. The second Senate seat that we're watching closely is in Salem. Incumbent Senator Republican Denise Bowles is being challenged by Democrat Deb Patterson, who is really working hard and raising a lot of money and doing a good job campaigning. So Bowles, people are concerned about her seat. It is unclear how that will come out at this point. And then the third seat that we're watching in the Senate is on the coast. It's Coos Bay. Senator Arnie Roblin is retiring. So the replacement election is between 2 candidates, Melissa, why am I blanking on her name? Melissa Cribbins, sorry. Melissa Cribbins, who's a county commissioner in the area, and she is running a really good campaign against Dick Anderson, who is the Republican who ran against Arnie Roblin last time and told me today he only lost last time by 349 votes against Arnie Roblin. So, that means that he definitely has a chance to win, even though that seat has been held by a Democrat. It's possible that it could switch to the hands of the Republicans. So, we're watching those. No matter what happens, we do not think that the Democrats will lose their majority. They will likely maintain a majority, but whether it is a supermajority or not, I think it's likely that if they lose any, they lose like 1, maybe 2. In the House, there's more races in play. There's 3, though, that are probably the highest priority. One is in Hood River with Anna Williams, who was elected and is trying to hold on to her seat against Republican challenger Jeff Helfrich, who has run before and who actually was appointed at one point to the legislature. So that's going to be a close race. We're also watching in Astoria, Tiffany Mitchell is stepping down after her first time. She spent 2 years in the legislature, but she's leaving. And so that seat is a toss-up. It's hard to say who will win at this point. And then there's the coast race where Representative Kathy McEwen is leaving. That's inside of the Arnie Roblin Senate district seat. And that is between Boomer Wright and Cal Mokomoto. Boomer is the Republican, Cal is the Democrat. Again, that is a very tough seat. I don't think that we know who is going to come out on top in that one. So we'll be watching that closely. And those are the three, I think, most competitive races. And I think it's unlikely that they would lose a supermajority in the House. Another race to mention is Sherry Helt's race out in Penn. She also is in a similar position to Tim Knope. There's also Raquel Moore Green in Salem, who has a pretty good challenger. And then there's several others, Niran Pruzak, and there's one more, who all were, elected recently and are holding on to their seats. But I think it's, we're watching those, and they're a little less competitive than the other tier that we just talked about. So we'll see how that all turns out. But I think overall, we're looking at pretty similar numbers to what we have now. There might be a few switching hands, but I don't think we're going to see anything too dramatic. Democrats, the one tool that Republicans have been saying they have left and that they've been using is to walk out and deny Democrats quorum. Quorum is 2/3 of the body. So in the Senate, it's 20 members, and in the House, it's 40 members. So I think that, while Democrats are aiming for that quorum-proof majority, it's pretty unlikely that will happen. Instead, they are going to be probably lucky to keep their supermajorities. Any questions?
Can I jump in real quick?
Please do.
So just to add on to what Tess said, so I think there's two thresholds basically that the Democrats and the Republicans kind of care about. First, as Tess mentioned, the 2/3 majority. In order to conduct any business on the floor, in order to pass bills, both the House and the Senate need at least 2/3 of members present and on the floor voting. And as she said, that's 20 in the Senate and 40 in the House. And in terms of stopping legislation, the final piece of the final tool that the Republicans really have in their toolbox is denying that quorum so that business literally cannot go on. So as I'm sure you all have read in the papers in the last few years, that is the tool that the Republicans have employed to, I think anybody would agree, pretty great success. They've been able to stop the main thing they cared about, which was cap and trade, by literally fleeing the state and not showing up. So the Ds are pushing really hard to get to that 20 in the Senate, 40 in the House, so that they can literally say to the Republicans, don't bother showing up. We're going to pass what we're going to pass, and you can either come here and vote on it or you cannot. The other threshold is a 3/5 vote, which is the threshold required to pass any sort of revenue raising measure. So a tax increase has to be approved by 3/5 of the Senate and 3/5 of the House. And in the Senate, that's 18 seats. And in the House, that's 36. So the Ds have that advantage in both the Senate and the House. The next threshold is basically to get to that 40-20 so that they can get a quorum-proof majority. I think most of us expect the numbers to stay pretty similar based on polls and what we're hearing. But the one thing that kind of could tilt things is voter turnout. And what we're seeing so far is a really dramatic increase in voter turnout from 4 years ago. The numbers are just, as we're kind of starting to see across the country, similar trends here where voter enthusiasm is really high. And generally speaking, this is not, Oregon specific, generally speaking, higher turnout tends to favor Democratic candidates. So that's one thing to keep an eye on, is how this high turnout affects some of these races that could go either way. And whether that tilts things enough in the Democrats' favor to get them to 40-20 or not is, kind of the big unanswered question in Oregon politics right now. So I will stop.
That's great. Thanks, Zach. Okay, so the one last thing I'll say is just that in the Senate too, just because they do have 18, but they do have a senator that sometimes does not vote in the party block. So I think they're looking for at least one more to make sure that they don't have any issues getting to that threshold to vote for taxes. Okay, so this is the timeline we have for leading up to next session. Obviously, Election Day, big one. Then we're going to get another revenue forecast. This is what we look at when we're evaluating how much money the state has at the time. It's a moment in time snapshot. We just had one that we're going to talk about in a second. And that kind of shows where we are now financially as a state. So we're watching that closely because obviously right now we're in a recession, and so that number is important. We have December legislative days. We just found out from the speaker that she wants to make that 2 weeks. Normally it's about 3 days long, so 2 weeks is much longer, but it's all going to be virtual, so we'll be watching that online. There is going to be a special session. We also know that is likely coming. They're on rent moratoriums and eviction moratoriums. They want to pick that up because the deadline that they set in previous legislation was the end of the year, and recognizing that this pandemic and subsequent recession are going to outlast the end of the year. They are trying to move that deadline. So we're going to likely see that in November, possibly in December. So Legislative Council, there was a deadline to get pre-session bills drafted. That was not the only deadline for getting bills drafted, but there is a large bulk that are done during that time. And then we're going to get those back from Legislative Council on December 7th. And then they're not bills yet. At that point, they are just still legislative concepts, or what we call LCs. And then in order to file them as a bill, you have to go to the clerk's office. I guess we're going to do this digitally somehow, and get them to sign off on the bills, and they get assigned a bill number at that time. And so the deadline to file pre-session bills is December 21st. Again, that does not mean that you cannot file bills. In fact, in most long sessions, you can introduce bills even during session. So, we're still trying to figure out what next session will look like, and you'll hear more about that. But these deadlines are not the end deadlines. These are the pre-session filing deadlines. Okay, and then we have committee assignments normally come out around the end of December. We expect, after the election, after new people have been elected, and there normally is some shakeup amongst the chairs. They might add new committees, subtract committees, so we'll be watching that. And then we have organizational days in January, and that leads right into the 2021 session as it is scheduled now. It is possible that timeline will move, but that is what we're looking at. And it's a 6-month session, and there's a ton of deadlines within that 6 months that we normally do have. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about that in a second. But I'm going to turn it over to Zach to talk about our budget, and a lot of this is based on that revenue forecast from September that I was talking about.
Sure. So thanks, Tess. As Tess mentioned, the budget is kind of it's obviously a large part of what the legislature does when it convenes. As part of that, the state economists provide a update every quarter for legislators in terms of what they see as the revenue coming in for the state over the next biennium. So that's the number that the budget writers use to craft a budget for the upcoming biennium. We budget in 2-year cycles. So what we're and on an odd numbered year. So the next one will be 2021 to 23. So prior to the end of, at the end of the 2019 session, the legislature passed the budget that was good up until June 30th of 2021. Obviously, once the pandemic hit and revenues across the board started to plummet, that changed things and necessitated a reconvening of the legislature to balance the budget. Oregon is one of some number of states that requires a balanced budget every year. So legislators are not allowed to go into any sort of debt when crafting a budget. So whatever resources are coming in, those are the ones they have available to spend. And the first revenue forecast post pandemic hitting was in May, when the state economists predicted that, as we saw across the country and on a federal level, revenues to just go off a cliff as, hundreds of thousands of folks were unemployed. Oregon, being an income tax state, is incredibly dependent on income taxes for its revenue. So as people were unemployed, we expected state revenues to drop dramatically. What we saw instead was, as the Paycheck Protection Program came, as the increased unemployment benefits came, as other coronavirus relief fund dollars came to both the state and to local government, we saw just to back up a second here, after the May revenue forecast, the legislature convened 2 special sessions in which they made some pretty significant cuts to state budgets based on those revenue projections that the state economists had given them in May. So they cut the budget, the 19 to 21 biennium budget, pretty significantly to try to create a balanced budget. When they reconvened for the September revenue forecast, the state economists, very surprisingly to I think everybody involved, they announced that the revenue was actually holding fairly steady, to the surprise of most. And that was due to those factors I mentioned before. You had all these federal dollars flowing into Oregon's coffers that kind of artificially propped up the numbers. So in addition to that, the income tax payments stayed relatively stable. So we didn't see the fall off in income tax dollars that we were expecting. And the net result of that was that we're going to end the 1921 biennium with a surplus of nearly greater than $1.7 billion. All those federal dollars, the income tax payments remaining relatively stable, that all contributed to this huge surplus that we're going to be able to carry forward to the next biennium, which is fortunate because as part of these revenue forecasts, the economists project out several bienniums. What they're projecting for the next biennium is a hole of somewhere between $3 and $5 billion, a decrease in revenue. So, and that's due to a number of factors. We're going to continue to very slowly climb our way out. A lot of those jobs that were lost are not coming back. And so we expect revenues to be really down across the board going forward for at least, for the next biennium and possibly even further than that. So depending on how quick the recovery is, whether there's any sort of additional federal stimulus dollars that come, and just kind of what the landscape looks like, they will have a hole to fill. And prior to the September forecast, the thinking was that there's not going to be a carry forward balance from the 1921 biennium. This is going to be just a straight $3 to $5 billion hole that we are going to have to make some. We thought the cuts in the 1921 biennium were bad. It's going to be nothing compared to the cuts we're going to have to make in the 21-23 biennium. Having said that, that $1.7 billion surplus is going to go a long ways to filling any sort of budget deficit that we will likely see in the 21-23 biennium. So still a lot that's to be determined here in the 21 session in terms of, we'll get another forecast, I believe in November, for an updated revenue forecast in November that will further let legislators and budget writers know what number they have to shoot for from a budget perspective. And kind of piggybacking on that a little bit to talk about what session may look like next year. As Tess mentioned earlier, it starts in mid-January, the day after Martin Luther King Day. What we don't know is whether it will be in person, whether it will be virtual, how some of these mechanics will work. The legislature has convened a work group with leadership from both parties, with members of the public, with members of the lobby, with agency folks to try to figure out what it's going to look like. And basically what they've looked at is 3 separate scenarios: a worst case, a likely, and a best case. The worst case scenario assumes Marion County moves back into phase 1, and any sort of indoor gatherings are prohibited. And that would be an entirely virtual session, similar to what we've seen in these special sessions where everything's virtual, testimony's virtual, legislators meet virtually. The only thing they have to do in person is vote on bills to be passed out of committee, and then vote on these bills to be passed off the House and Senate floors. So even though we've been doing everything virtually, the public has been excluded, the lobby's been excluded, most legislative staff have been prevented from being in the building. The votes have still taken place in person. And that's kind of a worst case scenario. It's not a good way, just experiencing it in the week of the special session we've had. It's just not an effective way for a government to operate. So, and that's a worst case scenario that they're trying to sort through. A best case scenario assumes that Marion County has moved to phase 3. Most pandemic related restrictions are lifted, and it's essentially business as usual in Salem. I would assume there's some sort of social distancing and mask requirements that are involved in that. And, we'll see what this winter brings, but right now that seems like a very unlikely scenario, given the direction that things are headed. But, there could be medical breakthroughs between now and then. We just don't know what it's going to look like. The likely scenario is that Marion County remains in phase 2 as it's in right now, and that there could be some sort of in-person meeting, a lot of with masks, social distancing, strict requirements on who enters the building, who leaves the building, when folks can be there, when they don't have to be there. There's just a lot of concerns to be looking out for right now. The average age of the Senate in particular is very much in the vulnerable population category. And I don't know that there's a lot of members of the Senate who are eager to be sitting in a 100 square foot office being with people funneling in and out for various meetings. So there's work groups that are convened that are looking at that right now. It's just, things are changing fast, and we just at this point we just don't know what it's going to look like. So stay tuned for more on that. As soon as we know, we'll pass it on. But I will stop there. Sorry, that was a lot of brain dump there. If anybody has any questions about this or the budget related stuff, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you. You might have mentioned this, but I don't know if I heard it. One other thing that they're looking at is possibly limiting bills like they do in a short session. Again, there is no consensus on that at this point. There are people on both sides, some who want to do it, some who don't. But I think no matter what happens, these are the top issues that we're going to be dealing with in 2021. And the speaker told us recently that, if an issue doesn't relate to one of these, good luck, but also, and you can still do it, but it's going to be really hard to get those done, especially if if they're not ready to go. So a lot of times a bills in committee, maybe you come up against a deadline and a chair can move that bill into a rules or revenue committee to kind of keep it alive. The speaker's saying that in this case, that's likely not going to happen. We're not going to have those extra time we're not going to be able to evade the deadlines that way. So, so the top priorities obviously are the pandemic. Just dealing with that. I know a lot about housing is going to be done on this issue. That's why they're coming back for another special session, along with possibly some liability reform. But they're going to be doing a lot more of that in the next session. We're also looking at police reform, racial equity. That is an ongoing conversation that's happening now. There is a work group. Zach's tracking that really closely. That's been going on for a while, and they will continue to have, they already have ideas on things they want to get done, and there will be even more of that come 2021. So, and then the last issue is wildfires, addressing what happened in the wildfires, and then working on prevention to try to address this from happening every year. So those are the top issues from the legislative perspective, but I just talked to a legislator today who, has other issues that she wants to deal with, and her, I thought she had one of the best comments on it, that they only get once every 2 years to bring these forward, because in the short session, they are limited to just a couple bills or a handful of bills. And so, maybe for some of the issues that she wants to bring forward, she's been waiting for 2 years. So she doesn't want to wait any longer and wants to bring those forward. And so I think we're going to still see a lot of those bills. Typically in a long session, we will see several thousand bills come out. That is a lot to handle. And the best part is, of course, cities care about so much of it. So we end up tracking maybe 500 or more bills for each of our city clients, which is quite a bit. That doesn't mean that we're engaging on all of those. Absolutely not. But we're maybe thinking that it could have some very minor impact in a lot of cases, and we're going to flag it, and kind of watch it as it goes along the process. Most of those will not pass, but then you can, we filter through, we find the ones that are the most important, and that's partially what we're here to talk about today. And then we track those and we engage in those in a lot more concerted effort. Let's see. So some of the things we've been working on for the city of Sherwood is obviously the pedestrian bridge funding. I think you're all familiar with that. In 2019, the legislature, with the help of Courtney Neron, allocated $2 million in lottery bonds for the pedestrian bridge. Between that 2019 and 2020 session, I believe that you all talked to some engineers and got information about how much the bridge would actually cost, which was a lot more than the original $2 million that was allocated. And so in 2020, CFM and the city of Sherwood went to Salem asking for additional funding. We did have $2 million more that were put into the budget, but unfortunately in the 2020 session, the budget did not pass. They actually did not. They ended up, because of the Republicans walking out and then the Democrats not wanting to compromise on cap and trade, the largest priority issue of last session, they ended up not passing really any bills. They passed 3. None of them were that big of a consequence. Or I'm sure they're important to someone. But so issues like the budget, we did not end up getting that additional funding, and that's just because nothing did end up passing. And now we're still tracking these lottery bonds. So with this new onset recession, unfortunately, the lottery bonds have been in jeopardy. So the ones that were allocated, that we had $2 million, set aside for this bridge. The problem is that they are now not able to sell the bonds as planned, which would have happened in the spring of 2021. So we're watching this closely. We're about to find out from the Treasury's office, hopefully next week, how much that fund, the lottery bonds, have recovered. So what we've heard, and we heard this in the September forecast, was that actually, now that bars and restaurants are open somewhat in most areas. Lottery revenues have rebounded quite significantly. So we're hopeful, because that is a hopeful thing. We're hopeful that we're going to see enough money that maybe they will do a partial sale in 2021, or they'll have some money where we can still secure the original $2 million dedicated for the bridge. So that is probably the top issue that we've been working on. And again, with the recession, it's just kind of in flux right now, and the legislature cannot act on that until they are all together. So there won't be any changes on that until a little later, until next year. And then as far as home rule, I wanted to put that on here because that is something that we're always watching out for. Representing local governments, we are constantly on the lookout for things that take away kind of the local government authorities. And that is something that we do have a speaker who isn't maybe the biggest fan of cities. And we've seen that in some of the legislation that she's done recently, including House Bill 2001 and others that really were maybe she kind of pushed what she wanted to see over the objections of cities. So that's something that we're constantly working on, and we just wanted to put that out there. I don't know that there's an issue right this moment, but there kind of always are. As far as the SDC work group, this is a new issue that just got brought up. Representative John Lively from Springfield, he's a Democrat, is the chair of the House Economic Development Committee. And so he wanted to bring forward this after they had discussed it in 2019 and it had gone nowhere. And then in 2020, nothing happened really. So now he's putting together a work group. It's going to start, I think, next Monday, I believe, or next week. And there are going to be 3 city representatives, 1 county representative, 1 special districts representative, 1 person from the Home Builders Association, 1 person from 1,000 Friends, and then 1 person from Smart Growth, along with Representative Mark Meek, Representative John Lively, Representative, who's the 3rd Democrat? Pam Marsh. Those are all the 3 Democrats, and 2 Republicans, Representative Jack Zika and Representative Brock Smith. So as you can tell, this is a House work group. And they're looking at bringing some legislation in 2021, which we expect we will want to closely and probably oppose. We will be watching that closely because it's hard to imagine what type of legislation comes out of this that doesn't hurt cities. So, there might be some low-hanging fruit that we can kind of, maybe make nice, but we are pretty concerned about this. This has kind of become one of our, we were trying to fight it and not even have the conversation now, but Lively was adamant about it. And so we are trying to get him to agree that, he won't bring forward sweeping legislation in this next session, and that this is not the time, that we have other issues to deal with first.
Well, so many of them they don't understand that this is the only mechanism they've given cities to build critical infrastructure, and even with that, it's incredibly limited.
I don't know what's going on there. That's them sounding the alarm on SDC work group. Does someone else have a comment?
I think Tim was saying something.
Is he the one with the alarm?
No, Keith covered what I was going to ask, because what I was going to ask in a different way is, that workshop, is it strictly limited to SDCs, or are they going to be, because as Keith pointed out, you can't take away SDCs without looking at how this infrastructure gets funded, whether that's property tax reform, the big one, or something else. So
yeah, and that is our talking point pretty much. Yes, unfortunately, I'm not sure how broad the knowledge of SDCs are. And so we have been talking about that. We're telling them that, look, really to have a conversation about SECs that is going, if we're really going to talk about reform, we have to talk about where that money comes from then, if it's not going to come from SECs. And so we need to talk about property tax reform. And you will see that that is one of LOC's priorities. And I believe if Senator Burdick, who's a Democrat of Portland, becomes the chair of, or she is the chair of the Senate Revenue Committee now. And so if she is more amenable, open to talking about property tax reform. So we see an opening there, and we are going to try to push that conversation. We do not think it will happen this session. Absolutely not. There's way too much else going on. But can we start that conversation now so that it can happen in a future session? That's really what we want to do with that. And that's kind of what they're saying they want to do with the SDC work group. But we just don't trust them that much. So we want to watch that closely and make sure that we're not going to get any negative impacts or fallout from that. The last thing I'll mention is CRF funding. We talked about this a little bit earlier. CARES funding, or CRF, coronavirus relief funding, came out of the CARES Act, which was the federal package passed in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. There was a lot of money that flowed to the state. I believe it was $1.4 billion total that the state got, and that's outside of the individual jurisdictions, Multnomah County, Washington County, and Portland, that got direct allocations. So the state had a lot of money to spend. Cities were pushing for a large portion of that. We wanted to see, I believe it was 45%. We were looking at the Treasury guidelines and asking for the full amount that was supposed to go, that was recommended to go to local governments. But unfortunately, the state did not do that. They went their own way, and they decided to allocate $200 million to cities that did not exist, cities and counties that do not exist in the jurisdictions that got direct allocation. So that meant that Sherwood was not eligible for any of these CARES reimbursement dollars that the state was handing out. Instead, the state wanted cities like Sherwood to work with their county to get coronavirus relief funds, which I know the city has been doing. However, there is, now that we're close to this deadline, the money of the CRF funds have to go back on December 30th. If they're not spent, they go back to the federal government, which obviously the state and local jurisdictions do not want to see happen. As of now, the cities that are eligible for reimbursement are drawing down on that money. One of the drawdown periods is actually happening right now until Friday. And so LOC is pushing cities to take out as much money as possible, because currently it still looks like there's about half of the money left. So it's really hard to make the argument that cities and counties need more money when so many cities and counties have not taken their full allocation at this time.
So since it's important at the Salem level, only if you think Sherwood is eligible for the state money that they're saying we can't have, then we don't need to talk about it. If there is Washington County money still at play that we should be pursuing, that's a different question. But since the governor has said we're not eligible for any of the state money, then unless that's going to change in the next 60 days, then we don't need to talk about this.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because we're trying to change that. So we're working on for the rest of this money that hasn't been allocated out yet, they're looking at what to do, because again, they don't want to just return it to the federal government. So LOC is working with DAS and the governor's office currently to set up a new plan for recovering those funds back from the jurisdictions, any unspent funds, and then reallocating them out to jurisdictions of need, including those within Washington and Multnomah County. And that is very clear on the part of LOC. And yeah, we are working hard to do that. Even though we've been
when do you expect the governor and the collective to make such a decision, because, yeah, I mean, you've got 60 days.
I know. Yeah, that's not ideal at all. And that is something that I am hoping I'll hear from you all tonight, that if you think that that Sherwood can use additional CRF funds with all the restrictions that you know exist around them, we'd love to hear that, because we want to push to try to get some of these unspent funds from other jurisdictions, if that is the case. So yeah, that is pretty up to date, because we just had that call. We've been discussing that with LOC this week. So this is brand new, this possible new program.
So again, you don't have any clue on when, if they make it, so no idea when you think they might make a decision, because there's got to be a go no go kind of a scenario, because if they turn around and ask, December 1 is almost too late to turn around and do whatever needed to process some of these funds to come to Sherwood.
Right. I believe the deadlines that we just discussed that LOC is now proposing to DAS is to hear. Okay, so anyone who has funds who don't need them, to tell LOC and DAS about that by November 6th, and then have by November 12th, all the jurisdictions who do want additional funding to have given that information to DAS or LOC. So expect an email soon on that.
That email will include the jurisdictions that are currently not allowed to ask for it from the state.
That is our goal. This is not an approved plan. This is definitely.
I understand. Sorry, I'm just trying to move things along and get specific points as much as I can on that. So
yeah, I will follow up as soon as we have any new information, because that is obviously moving very quickly. Okay, and so these are the, LOC did the survey that you will know about, and these were the 6 items that came up as the top that all the cities voted for. So you probably have seen this in the LOC bulletin. You can see property tax reform is on there. I'm not going to spend too much time. Well, I can if you want. If anyone has any questions about these, I can go through them, but.
No, that's their focus. Doesn't need to be ours.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then of course these are the other LOC priorities, which are kind of always there, right? Not taking away from local revenue streams, avoiding unfunded mandates. Yes, so all of these are the pieces they're constantly protecting against. And then these were the 4 items that Sherwood voted for in the LOC survey. So you all should be familiar with these. And so we kind of understand these to be top priorities for the city, obviously. And that's why we're still on, trying to get those CRF dollars, because we see, economic recovery investments as your #1 priority. So we are pushing hard, and we're being loud in LOC about that. Okay, so really our goal here is now to just kind of have a discussion about what else does the city of Sherwood want us to be working on as we go into this 2021 session. And here are some other ideas. This is just taken from the LOC survey. It does not, you don't have to use any of these, but I thought it might be useful to look at some while we talked about this. And so I don't know if it makes sense to go around and hear from people. I don't know if people have given any thought to this already, or if we want to just start a conversation. But maybe, Keith, have you given thought to other priorities that you'd like to see?
Yes, but I want to give other folks a chance to weigh in. So, Council, what? So you saw, the 4 that we gave the LOC here. What items do you think are also significant? And it could be on this list, or it could be it could be money for fill in the blank. It could be,
I have some thoughts.
yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking that sort of looking ahead, long-term planning ahead, Sherwood West, finishing out Tonquin, if we could find, as Mayor Mace calls them, those secret pots of gold that have funds, maybe we could figure out how we align what we are doing with what they want to see in the end. And then the committee looks at our application and realizes, oh, this is exactly what our restrictions are. And we get money to do a road, which we are not going to get right now, or whatever it is we have on our plan. Some of those costly, expensive infrastructure projects. So I'm not sure what that means, but I like that first bullet at the top. Finding ways to finance infrastructure so that, we are ready for the wave of development that Bruce is bringing on us.
Okay.
Russell, that's a really good point. I was trying to figure out a way of articulating that, and you did a great job of it, because I think we have a whole laundry list of projects identified, on our transportation plan, et cetera, and how do we could get all of those shovel ready, so to speak, but where should the priority be? What's the of all those projects, where should we be spending time to make sure we're ready in case something pops up?
Other comments?
It might be worthwhile, with the city, not for this meeting, because I think it's probably a longer meeting, but having a separate meeting to go through what we're doing with broadband in Sherwood, so you have a good understanding of that, and the different funding mechanisms that we're considering. So you can be, well, two things. One is, get your input, on best ways to approach that, for sure. The second is maybe a little defense, because, we are seeing a little bit more energy being put out by the commercial carriers that would love to see us not do our broadband project, right? And making sure, and I'm sure they're talking to Salem, right? So it might be worth having a separate meeting just to go over that.
Yeah, happy to do that anytime.
Other thoughts, ideas? Well, certainly do no harm. We've no harm done to Sherwood with our revenue streams. The state, if I read, and I think I read it correctly, the one proposal that's on the ballot actually would reduce the formula for marijuana sales in the event recreational sales became allowed in Sherwood. So I thought that was kind of interesting. As well as the proposal was to raise additional funds and sin taxes, but they abandoned the historical sharing of those taxes, which is problematic, a very bad trend in the one bill if it passes.
Wasn't there some talk at one time about allowing localities a higher percentage for marijuana taxes? Like our cap is 3% now. Wasn't there some talk at some point of 7%?
I do remember that.
There's definitely the Metro Mayors Consortium. It's on their list of priorities to make sure that jurisdictions that have it allowed for recreational sales can increase, or the rate is increased, so that there is no so that cities are not actually harmed by anything that gets passed in November or acted in Salem.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I have an item maybe to put on your watch list. So recently, Washington County they voted it down, but it's probably going to come up again. But they were going to create a property tax levy to fund early childhood education, preschool, and those types of things. The challenge there is it's really should be on the school side of the property tax fence.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a lot of school districts, Beaverton comes to mind, that are in compression, even in good time. So they can't go out for a levy, but this is a way of kind of skirting around all of that and putting the tab on the city side, which a lot of cities aren't in compression right now. So I don't know if you're seeing any of that at the state level, but we're seeing a little bit of that at the county level here, and something to watch for.
Certainly the specific type of tax and its use had been shopped in Salem for many years as something that folks wanted to advocate to be able to create special districts for, and that got nowhere in Salem because there are so many competing interests for different folks that want to be able to create a special district for fill in the blank. And so then their fallback was counties with local option levy, and Clackamas County is the first one that's actually got it on the ballot to see if it goes anywhere. That could be coming back. And so just, it goes back to property tax reform, property tax.
That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a lot of talk about revenue. So I think as far as the marijuana tax, I remember that there was a conversation about increasing it. I don't remember where that went. I can look into that. On the ballot right now, I believe that it does take the funding, and if it passes, it would take it and use it for behavioral health. So then what will happen? I think then the legislature acts from there. I think it's likely to pass, but until it does, it's hard to say exactly what that means.
Value for us to do a follow-up post-election from a priority standpoint with what we need you to do or do for us, because if there's a whole list of if this passes, if this person's elected, if this person is elected, how that impacts what we want to pursue. If there's a clear path for a big federal program for infrastructure, then how does actions in the federal level impact what states need to do to try to leverage their chances of getting the federal dollars? And that trickles all down to us. Cities are always at the bottom of the pile, or whatever you want to call it, but end of the line. Then similarly, if our if our measure to approve rec pot fails, again, we're not going to be in a big huff to want to spend any energy to worry about marijuana recreational tax rates.
Right.
Yes, certainly. So the protect what we have is important. Protect our rights with infrastructure, with revenue sharing, with our ability to do Sherwood broadband, local urban renewal districts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, urban renewal districts are on people's radar because they're focusing on a lot of other things. We've certainly done. We're really quite proud of what we're doing with law enforcement and equity and balance and best practices. If there's efforts in Salem, I'm hoping that the parties in Salem are involving Oregon's the state of Oregon's Police Chiefs Association group. So they're not making decisions in a vacuum.
Yeah. From what I can tell, it does seem like there's a lot of parties at the table in those conversations, and they are including the police and the police unions and different groups from from all sides, really. So and Zach is the one who's really been following that. So I don't know if he has more information on that.
Yeah, I mean, the chiefs of police have certainly been involved in that. They've testified at the hearings. They've helped to craft some of the policies, and there is what we've seen so far. They've helped with, and then playing defense on a few things that would be unwieldy for cities, and trying to craft them into something that's a little more manageable for the cities. They've been helpful in that, so they are certainly participating.
Great. Another thing that's important to me.
Yeah.
Granting Metro no new authority. And supporting any initiatives that curb their authority.
Okay.
100%. Too much already.
I hear a second on that. All right.
I'll give you a third.
And a third. Okay, that is good to know. This is really helpful because this is kind of giving us areas to go look into, focus on, see what they're all doing. We haven't seen a list of the bills yet, so it's hard to know exactly what's coming. But when you mention something like urban renewal, I'll tell you that was up, last session we were having some discussions about that. And we were playing a little defense. So it is something that will likely come back. But is it a priority for this session? Hard to say. And if it didn't pass last time, we'll see what its likelihood is. So there's part of that too.
And then I don't know how you deal with this one, but House Bill 2001.
Yes.
I didn't like it, but it wasn't what ended up getting passed seemed to be workable, and then it got to this legislative work group or
task worker. Yeah.
The post bill implementation committee at and where they're putting in they're fine tuning the law, and they're making it horrible.
Okay.
Because they're giving the standard building code for communities that don't have the resources or means to do it, and then there's the one that's flexible. There's very little flexibility in the flexible one, which is just really incredibly disappointing if it's adopted. So I don't know what I'm really asking, but prevent.
What can we do?
Prevent bureaucrats from agencies to make bills more restrictive than I believe was the legislative intent.
Absolutely.
So
I know
so
there's
along the I was going to say, so along those lines, this goes back, I can't remember the bill name, but there was a bill that took away our right to have our citizens vote on annexations. So, yeah.
1587.
There we go. Thank you, Kim.
Good job remembering that. Okay.
Yeah. So that at that point in time, that was our stopgap. That was where we could control growth, right? And with the passage of that bill, now it's around when we actually request a urban growth boundary expansion. I do have concerns that the lobbying groups are going to come after that and push harder around taking our ability to manage our growth at that particular intersection in time in their process. So just something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, that's a good one as well. Okay, and I will just mention that there is a group still talking about House Bill 2001 and the implementation. So I think there is likely legislation coming. So I'll review that even closer, and I'll get that to you all.
So do you believe, because that's not my understanding, but that that the work that staff is doing down there with, I'm drawing a blank, I apologize, but,
Is it LCDC?
yes,
Mayor?
LCDC does. Does LCDC, are they going to refer that back to put it into law? Or understand that they could just have the authority to, on their own, to say, here's the standard code, and the one with a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. They likely have the authority to implement what they're implementing, but I think it'll be a question of will the legislature get involved in that if it's not going in the direction that they believed it would go in.
Okay.
I think it's challenging with the speaker, who obviously was the person who spearheaded 2001 in charge, but yeah, I think there's definitely conversations there.
LCDC will have quite a bit of latitude in their rulemaking process in terms of how they implement it. And if they steer out of bounds one way or another too egregiously, then the legislature could step in. But it's really kind of the rulemaking process is where the sausage is made, so to speak.
Oh yeah, and it's just really from my seat in the stands, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, where's the accountability in that process?
Yeah, it really does come from, other lobbyists and people tracking it, taking it to legislators and trying to get them involved and trying to put pressure back onto LCDC to do a certain thing, or if they won't, creating a new bill and trying to get that done to override what is going on. So those are kind of the options.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's still people we haven't heard from. I'm wondering if those who haven't talked about what other priorities they might like, if they might want to weigh in on things that they're thinking about or would like us to discuss.
Going once, going twice. I think post-election, just to touch base, will be important when one means or another.
Well, and I can kind of go back through maybe what I've heard so far, and then, we can see if that kind of gets us where we wanted to go, or if we want to have more discussion. So I'm hearing, a lot of do no harm. So kind of a defensive, like making sure that revenue isn't taken away or authority isn't taken away from local governments in any way. We're looking at broadband. We want to make sure to defend against any efforts there might be in Salem to prevent your broadband projects, which I'm going to learn more about, hopefully, from Councillor Rosner. And then post-election, looking at marijuana taxes and that revenue stream, and either protecting it or increasing it. Looking at property tax reform, especially as we're making sure that if we're going to reform it, it's in a way that works for cities and is positive for cities, and maybe doesn't cut in and make it so that you guys are going to have what's that? Oh God, why am I blanking on the word?
Again,
compression.
Net loss with changes. If Salem likes to, in my opinion, cities are getting killed by 1,000 cuts and these little tiny cuts here and there, and if they take big swaths, then they need to, give something. They need to restore tools that they've taken away. So, one of our priorities was, municipal pole protection. Well, again, if there's a different mix of the FCC back in DC, then prior orders, could be changed so that's no longer a risk if but if it stays the way it is, then this is going to be a continued effort point.
Yes. I also heard urban renewal, protecting that. Watching the law enforcement conversation and making sure that it works with everything that's going on in your city and what you guys are seeing and wanting, and your police force is feeling. Looking at making sure the Metro isn't getting greater authority. Watching.
If there's some stretch, and I don't see it happening in this decade, but if there was a movement to limit their authority, we'll jump on that train.
I think that's a little bit more likely than expansion at this point down in Salem, I would say. Yeah.
You actually think there's some bad blood down in Salem against Metro?
I think it is challenging for Metro down in Salem. They have a hard time getting things.
That fire. Seriously. I think they might, if their transportation measure fails, that'll add an interesting.
It will.
Conversation.
Yes. Yes.
And certainly, infrastructure financing, leveraging potential state dollars, federal dollars, depending upon what happens, in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I will say, because we talked about the budget situation, it's very challenging right now to be getting more revenue sources. Part of this is because at the state level, we again have to balance our budget. In DC, they can print money, which is why it's always tight for us. So I will say that it's going to be pretty challenging to be getting new revenue in the very near term. Again, we're protecting the bridge funding. We're obviously working on that. And hopefully, if we get more influx from the federal government with another coronavirus package or something like that, that could be really helpful. And maybe if they're doing a transportation package.
Yep. Yep.
Any other issues that? Oh yeah, and then also not taking away any authority for you guys to have votes to. Sounds like, well, there's the annexation issue, but not specifically just that. I think you also want to make sure that you can vote for things if you want to, and have that authority and not get it taken away. So maybe restoring that.
Home rule. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think that sounds good.
All right.
It's a good list. Anyone else want to add anything to it? Subtract anything?
There might be more coming your way after folks digest as well. So
that would be fine. If anyone wants to email me, my email is tess@cfmpdx.com. Sorry, I don't have that in my slides, but I would be
out to everybody.
Happy to get those emails from you and follow up. And if any of you ever want to have a conversation about what's going on in Salem or have any questions about anything, we're here. Dale, Zach, and I are available. And if we don't have the answer, we can always look it up and get back to you. So we just want to be a resource for you. And then we want to go to Salem and make sure that we're representing Sherwood in the best light possible and really protecting against more creep of their authority and position you in the best way possible. Try to get some positive wins for cities and for Sherwood.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tess.
Oh, absolutely.
And Dale and Zach. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you all for taking a lot of
you.
time out of your night for this.
Yeah, it certainly helped. We didn't have regular business on council. We just could do work session. So
awesome.
Sorry, we're very long-winded. We had a big presentation. I hope we didn't go too long.
No, it's all good. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
Good. Great. Well, I think what we'll do now is we'll watch the election. We'll also put together a kind of what we're thinking we heard document, come back and maybe, I don't know if we'll do this like this again, but somehow we'll get back in touch with you and make sure that gets approved.
Awesome. Thank you, Tess.
Okay. So Tess, remember you need to get rid of your presentation so we can move on. That's okay.
I will stop presenting.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Next is talk about our COVID business support program we have in Old Town. I keep forgetting the name.
Fresco.
Fresco.
Yeah, our special event permit thing. So, Julia, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to Julia and Bruce. They have a very short presentation, and then we'll get to hearing from councilors. The program, the Alfresco program, has largely been handled by Julia and Bruce in working with the Old Town restaurants, food and drink establishments. So we anticipated that there may be some interest, folks watching at home. So this presentation is not only for council, but also for the public to understand how we got to this point and where we are and where we will be heading. So it's not a long presentation, but I will hand it over to Julia. So go ahead, Julia.
Thanks. And I would be remiss not to mention Kelsey, who really implements the program. We were more the applicant type of role, and Bruce did a lot of the outreach, but Kelsey was very instrumental as well. My view is different than I'm used to seeing while presenting. I just want to make sure that you guys can see my presentation.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
So yeah, as we mentioned, talking about the Alfresco program, just a quick background. So we sent a reminder to businesses on last Friday, reminding them that the program was going to end on October 31st. As you, I'm sure, are aware, there was quite a bit of social media over the weekend, and several councilors asked to have this work session to discuss the program in general and the ending of the program. The city, Bruce, went out and met with business owners and reached out to business owners along Railroad Street to let them know about this work session and asking them to share with council their perspective. And you also have received numerous emails over the last couple days from just citizens, patrons, all that kind of stuff. And I believe the majority of the input that you received supports an extension. The real question that we're wanting to discuss and get your feedback is whether or not to continue the formal SEPA program to allow use of the right-of-way. Just a reminder, the Alfresco program is essentially a special event. The SEPA process allows things like the Robin Hood Festival and cruise-in and those types of things, but we applied for a special event permit to allow use of the right-of-way and closure of right-of-way for this Alfresco program. We established it to allow Old Town businesses opportunities to use the right-of-way and on-street parking in order to be open and be in accordance with the state social distance requirements. The participating businesses that have sort of entered into the participation agreement that we set up are Fat Milo's, 503 Uncorked, Rallison, Mason, and Symposium. But we also want to mention that there's a lot of other businesses that benefited because we did a Gazette ad where we advertised promoted all of the restaurants that have outdoor seating. We've promoted it on the website, social media, really encouraging folks to patronize all restaurants in town, especially those that have the outdoor seating. Initially, we envisioned the program to run from June 2nd to September 7th, but as we got closer to September 7th, we were requested and did extend the program to October 31st. So what does the SEPA do? That's, again, kind of seeing a lot of the emails and letters and things like that. I think it's important that we clarify what this program does, but then also what it doesn't do. So the main thing is it allows use of the parking and right-of-way. So Fat Milo's, they are able to block off the sidewalk in front of their business to use the entire sidewalk area and reroute pedestrians to the parking area. So we've taken away a couple of parking spots to allow that rerouting, and that gives them space out in front of their building. And then they also have some space in the back on their private property that's also for outdoor seating. 503 Uncorked, Rallison and Mason, basically we've closed the entire street, and they have that the sidewalk in front of their businesses as well as the street, and we've rerouted pedestrians to the sidewalk on the other side of the street. And then Symposium has been allowed to use essentially the parking spaces for their drive-through aisle, as well as the alley for drive-up window. As part of the SEPA program, we also provided the barricades and barriers, and just wanted to note that that does come with a cost that the city is covering. To date, it's been about $7,500. It's about a little over $1,500 a month for the rental of those equipment. We also provided signage both to parking areas as well as other businesses that were potentially impacted by the closure of Railroad Street, and that costs about a little over $4,500. We also, as part of every SEPA process, coordinate with Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, TriMet, and then the city departments, Public Works, Police, Engineering, all those things. So that's what. Yes.
Question on that: is this cost that we've incurred or can continue to occur, are those able to be CARES funds able to be used for those to reimburse the city?
I believe we have or will request reimbursement of those. I'm not 100% positive. I think David is on the call in the meeting, and maybe he could chime in if I was incorrect.
They're certainly eligible. I don't know if we requested and or got reimbursed. So David is on the call and can answer that if he knows it, or we can get back to you with more accurate information. David, are you?
You would still have until the end of December, correct, to request, correct?
We only got a certain allocation from the county, so.
Just if we've used that whole allocation or not.
So I'm not hearing David chime in, so maybe he's not on the call.
Okay, we can get back to us. That's
yeah,
fine.
we'll get back to you, but I believe it is eligible. I know that the signage, for example, we coded it specifically to one of our COVID job codes, so we are definitely tracking that and can get reimbursement wherever we can get reimbursement from.
Yeah, I would say if we haven't asked for reimbursement and we still have funds available, we certainly should just go ahead and ask.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I expect that we'll be asking for more than we're eligible for. And if we're able to ask from the state, then we'll pursue the state as well for reimbursement.
Yep, I think Mayor Mays is correct. We have more than what we've been reimbursed for. It may or may not include this, and there may be other opportunities to seek reimbursement for these costs. Certainly are eligible.
Okay.
So I also want to point out what doesn't change when the SEPA ends, because again, a lot of the letters that we received were made it seem like we weren't supporting businesses and that kind of thing. Outdoor dining on private property is absolutely still allowed and encouraged, and the planning department is more than willing and able to work with business owners about temporary use, flexibility, usage of private parking if that's available. And so we have been and will continue to do that even if this program goes away. Also, the Old Town public sidewalks are still available for businesses to use as they have in the past. ADA access needs to be maintained, of course. And then absolutely our ongoing support of local businesses throughout this COVID even before it happened. Bruce does a tremendous job of supporting local businesses in every way, and that continues and will continue even with the ending of the program. And then we've purchased the signage that points out the public parking spaces, and I think that's been a really good and valuable thing, and that will continue to be available as well.
So I had a question on that one as well,
yeah.
Unless you want me to wait till the end, but
Nope,
then
no,
I
no,
might
go
forget.
ahead.
So when you say things that will not change, we have some businesses that have thankfully been able to put up tents, whether behind their business or to the side of their business, like Symposium, or some tents like over at Smockville. Are those fine and dandy regardless, or have those been given special provisions to be allowed to be put up, or they can put them up and there was no issue to begin with?
They are allowed through other standards, temporary standards through the fire department or through planning. It's not part of the SEPA permit, which is really targeted towards use of the public right of way. So all of those can continue as they are permitted.
No, I understand it wasn't part of the SEPA, but were they permitted? What am I trying to say here? Were they allowed because of the COVID situation, or would they have been allowed year-round, period, regardless if we were in COVID or not?
They would be allowed, period, not year-round, is my understanding, because there are limits on how long you can have tents and things like that without it being a permanent structure.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out, because some of those businesses have that advantage to have property to be able to do that on, when some businesses don't have that, which is why we have the SEPA. So
right, and that said, I mean, again, there's been some there might be situations where a business is temporarily using space that they wouldn't so it's going to vary, depending on the business, but there might be something that's a temporary use, which potentially could be allowed at any time, but because of COVID, they applied for it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
So can I ask a little bit of a deeper question?
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing you say, well, what I think I'm hearing you saying is that the tent structure is permissible, but there's a limit to for how long it could be up. So
and I'm gonna get to that in a couple of slides if you bear with me for a moment.
Okay. Well,
or
then I'll hold my.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with that is in particular with Fat Milo's is they have a tent structure in back. So I'll wait until you get there and then I'll ask the question.
Okay. All right.
I'm eating my dinner, so I'm gonna turn the camera back off.
Okay. So I wanted to also comment or bring up, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about Portland and Beaverton having programs and us, people wanting us to emulate or sort of embrace those as well. So I did a little bit of digging, and I'll caveat that it was a little bit of digging into Portland's program, which is the Healthy Business Permit. I did try to reach out to somebody, actually a few people, and haven't gotten a return phone call, but their website is actually pretty detailed and pretty good. So this is what sort of some key points that I got from their website. They basically had a Healthy Business Permit shortly after COVID hit, or when they were able to open, when they went into phase 1, that basically expired October 31st, and they have a new permit that runs, that people will need to apply for, that will run from November 1st to March 31st, essentially 6 months. They can apply for the permit to use sidewalk, on-street parking, alley, or street, but it's not an automatic, and so it's likely going to vary from place to place. I heard anecdotally from talking with somebody at Beaverton, and I haven't been able to verify this with Portland staff, that really the only place in Portland that has a street closure for this program is in Northwest Portland somewhere. The bulk of the use of this program is in sidewalk and parking uses. They also have to keep the sidewalks 6 feet clear for pedestrians. They're allowed to have the tents in the parking area and the sidewalk. They have to meet fire code. All the tents have to meet fire code. And then they do provisions that say they need to be removed. The tents would need to be removed during severe weather, such as wind, snow, or ice. Beaverton's program is called Open Air Beaverton. It was a formal program that was adopted by the Beaverton City Council, which allowed flexibility to a lot of standards, including parking space standards and all sorts of things. So it was a little bit more of a formal program that was adopted, and then allows administrative changes as needed. So it doesn't have to go back to council in order to administer the program. It allows the use of on-street parking spaces and walkways. They have to maintain ADA access, and they only have pop-up tents. So they do not have the permanent tents that that we've seen on Railroad Street, and even what Fat Milo's has in the back. It's pop-up tents only. Except for they've closed one street, First Street. It's for a block. They call it the First Street Dining Commons, and it's unlike Sherwood's program, where every business kind of is able to block off their space and provide sit-down service in those areas. This dining commons is more communal, so patrons would go to the businesses that front the street, or other businesses if they wanted to, get their takeout, and then go sit in this, under this tent, and have their meal, sort of like a food court, if you will. There's no set time frame for, it's not going to close at any specific time. It's sort of open until further notice. And what I don't know is how that tent is able to be extended beyond 180 days, because that's the, oh, I went the wrong way. That's sort of the issue, or one of the things that that we need to consider, is that our understanding is per fire code. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Per fire code, temporary structures such as tents are only permitted for up to 180 days. Then they have to be reviewed as a permanent structure. Currently, our program, we're at 142, and that will expire on November 27th. So that's the time frame as we understand it for these types of structures.
And Julia,
I'll pause there because that's probably the biggest question.
And Julia, there's also rules about heaters.
Yes, yeah, so you're not allowed to have propane heaters under the tent. And so that's a safety issue that would have to be addressed if they are going to have the heaters up during the cold and the rain, making sure that they're in compliance. And then also other potential safety issues. In talking with Kelsey, she pointed out that during recent wind, some of the tents flew a little bit. So it's something that we need to be certainly aware of as we get into the winter months with wind and rain and ice and snow, that could be problematic as well. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so, I mean, the wind issue can be dealt with, and obviously they got to comply with the heater issue because that's a fire hazard. The 180-day limit is, and I'm guessing that was put in place because eventually a building needs to be permanent. You can't put a tent up and operate out of it for 20 years or whatever the time frame someone might be contemplating. But given COVID, given the state of emergency on, are we doing any advocacy with our partner cities around us? Because I think they're all going to run into this challenge, especially with these cities like Portland extending their program out through March 31st to get maybe the governor to address this in an emergency order, or get some in terms of the fire code for the state, to allow some relief on that 180-day time limit. Because if we don't get some relief on that, we can't go past the 27th of November, is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, we need to explore it a little bit more, because obviously the fire code didn't envision pandemics.
Right.
And you're right, in talking with Tom Mooney with TBFNR about this, he was pointing out that part of it is like churches would have tents outside, or there'd be things where it's like you expand your programs and you have tents, and at some point, like you said, it needs to be a permanent structure. And there are it's complicated, and there are provisions within the building code where you could potentially have a permitted tent through the building code, however, not in the right of way. And so it's problematic, not just in Sherwood, but everywhere where these tents are being proposed in right of way. The building codes don't allow. The building code does not provide authority for structures in the right of way. Yeah. So
so in conclusion, it's important to note that this is the law, that we don't from the fire marshal, but your city staff is exploring what flexibility there could be to go beyond 180 days, but we don't know that today.
That is correct.
But we might learn in the coming days or weeks if this changes or not, and then that could impact what Joe does or doesn't do with the SEPA. Because just as a reminder, this is nothing the city council does. We do not have, the city council has zero authority over a special event. It is the city manager. So, Joe, what is your thought process now? I mean, I think you heard certainly from community members, heard from some councilors, or do you want to hear from more other councilors about your thoughts of what you are or are not contemplating with the current SEPA?
Correct. I would like to, two things. I want to piggyback on what the mayor said. The fire code is the fire code. And this restriction was not envisioned for COVID times, and we need some more time to work with. And it's not just an issue here in Sherwood, it's an issue in other locales as well. So we will continue to work on that issue with TVFNR and others on that front. I want to hear from other councilors your thoughts about any possible extension of time. And what your thoughts are. That's very important to me in my decision making, as always. So
we got 4 hands up I'm seeing, and I apologize for not noticing before. Doug,
okay.
Sure, I'll go. I mean, obviously, yeah, all of this is contingent upon getting an exception to the fire code. So we can just put that as an obvious barrier. Feels like we should definitely be talking to Beaverton for sure, and potentially Portland too, because they have the same issues. So either they're figuring out a way around it or they're ignoring it, and we should work together on that. As far as myself, assuming we can get past that barrier, I'm in 100% support of extending this program, as long as it's feasible for the businesses.
So just to clarify, or I guess on behalf of Joe, so the November 27th is really the end of the 180 days as we understand it. So, and right now the program is supposed to end October 31st. So even if we can't get around the 180-day issue, it's possible to still extend the program a little bit. So I think Joe would look for kind of how warm or cold council might be to lengths of time.
Yeah.
So same answer for me.
All right. Kim, were you next? Okay. So Kim, your hand's up.
Yes. Yep. So I also am in full favor of extending this, definitely at least through the end of November, to stay within fire code until we hear more about fire code. I've spoken with personally 4 businesses on that street, 3 that are part of the SEPA, 1 that isn't, and they were all 3 of them were fully supportive. 1 wanted to make sure that more of the businesses were supportive of it, and not just one business was interested in extending, but it sounded like all the businesses, at least in that section of railroad that's closed, are on board and are okay with the any extension that we give. So yeah, I guess that's, I think we're in full favor. I think we only heard from 1 business that wasn't in favor, that's not on railroad, but I think on Pine had some concerns on that. So I would be in favor. I think we need to do all we can do to support our businesses throughout the whole city, not just Old Town, making sure that if there's businesses in other part of the town that need some sort of flexibility. I know Hops and Drops has put seating in between their buildings. I mean, I think people are trying to be as creative as they can to keep going. So I think anything we can do to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Sean?
You're muted.
Your microphone, Sean.
Thank you very much. It's the first time using a virtual meeting. So yeah, I spoke with Joe earlier today. Yeah, definitely in favor of seeing what we can do to support these local businesses. I think if we can extend it out to the November date, if we make that decision tonight, or look to make that decision tonight, I would vote to do that as well. I think since we still have some research to do, I echo what was said as far as let's see what we can do to find some loopholes, and if there aren't any, let's see if we can create some. I want to help these businesses out. There's got to be some negotiating or something. These are unprecedented times, and I'm not a big fan of saying, well, that's the way it is, and leave it at that. So I appreciate Julia and Bruce and everybody, and Joe obviously pushing and doing what you can. I think we just started to hear from everybody quite strongly this weekend, so I think we've got some work still to do. So I would advocate for moving forward, at least pushing past the deadline. I do want to hear, Julia, maybe I missed it, but talking about the tent issue as well with Fat Milo, as Renee had asked. Did we address that issue?
They'll be in the same, whenever their tent went up, their clock starts on 180 days, just like the symposium tent starts when they're for 180 days.
Okay.
Clancy's, Mockville, any of those who have tents up would all be under that same.
Yep.
And that's within a calendar year, is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding. The difference, and I don't want to complicate things because I don't know all the details, but the difference with those tents on private property is that it may be possible to get a building permit for those tents to make them permanent. There'd probably be, a process to do that. There would be a process to do that, but it might be within the realm of possibility, whereas in the right of way, that's not.
Sure. Well, and since 2020 has lasted like 5 years so far, is there any way we can, play with that 180 days a little bit? And just try to be creative here.
And just to be clear, we don't, that is the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue's rule regarding the 180 days. We don't, that's not an enforcement.
And so I've heard a couple different terms. I've heard rule and I've heard law. What, is there a difference between the two, or?
It says OFC on the pamphlet. That's
fire code. It's law.
It's the state fire code, yes.
Okay. It's Oregon fire code that all fire districts have to operate under.
Right.
Correct.
Got it.
And just one clarification, it's 180 days within a 12-month period. So we don't have, the clock doesn't restart January 1st, unfortunately.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Awesome. Renee?
I was pretty much going to reiterate the same thing, but also ask about the November 27th and ask about the clarification of the tents. So just so that I'm completely on the right page, the code exists for TVFNR, but can people apply to have it extended? Do they have to request what, or it is what it is?
We don't know the answer to that yet at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Because there will be a couple businesses, if that is the case, they will be out of business. So, all right, cool. That's all I had.
Awesome.
Oh, nope. One more thing. One of the other businesses was concerned about parking. Yeah, so whatever we do is just trying to address that as well.
Okay, awesome. Russell?
Symposium. I think they should be able to continue their driveway. Sorry. I'm done now.
Yeah. I feel that the code is the code. We have no control over that, and we would always want to fall in line with whatever the state fire code is. However, seeing that the 27th is actually the day after Thanksgiving this year, maybe Julia could go back and reassess. Did we really start the clock ticking on a particular day? Maybe she's off by 3 or 4 days. Maybe it actually is okay to leave those up through the 30th. I'm just saying we should check her paperwork. Sometimes paperwork gets lost. Sometimes it ends up in a Dropbox and it gets set on fire. I just feel like we should really evaluate carefully the start date of certain tents, because you never know how that might shift a few days.
Well, my understanding is it's complaint driven anyways. So
exactly, yeah. So my take is I completely support the program. I think whatever we can do to help our local businesses in this unusual, weird time, I feel like within our powers, we should be doing that. I noted Ms. Garcia's thoughts about parking as well, and so now that it has gone out into the Cosmo universe, and Joe's heard about it, and if the chief is on the line, then now we know that there might be an issue with parking, and they could maybe address that for her. She's been downtown a long time, so she's seen it all. She was there before City Hall and the library went up, so she's seen it all. And if the worst case scenario is we go through the 30th of November after the big Thanksgiving weekend, and then everybody has to take it down, but then we get together with the chamber, we get together with economic development and Bruce and his team, and we figure out, well, when is the best time to start our 6-month plan for next year, and we plan it and we make it a big deal. And this could be, I don't think we should just stop it now. I think businesses are going to be hurting for a while, but that's down the road. So, but I'm all thumbs up.
Awesome. Thanks,
so,
Russell.
Councillor Griffin, I think your point about when the tents went up, I will check with Kelsey, because I'm not sure if that date was from when the SEPA permit was approved or when the tents were actually up. So that's a really good point. But I want to point out, we did not set the clock. We did not start the clock. We do not monitor the clock. That's all TVFNR. So that will be, as we talk to them and see if there are, solutions, but just want to, we don't get to.
I know. And I would say that I think staff has done an amazing job trying to facilitate this process for our business. I really do. And I appreciate all that they've done. And I would never, ever assume that Julia would do anything. I know her too well. She would never do anything that would be against the rules ever. Oh, I did ask her, though. I was thinking about that slide that had the cost of those cement barriers that have cool plastic covers over them. And I know Craig is maybe on the line, but if we're going to do this next year, I think we should buy our own bare cement barriers and get a forklift and put them in place and paint them or something. I don't think we should be paying $1,500 a month for those barriers. If we could just, you know, Craig's got a ton of room over at Public Works. We'll just store them over there. So hopefully he didn't hear that. That's all. I'm done now.
So, Councilor Griffin, those are not concrete. Those have water in them.
Well, oh, they're water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so we can't just get cheapo cement ones and keep them at Public Works and then just move them over there?
We could, but we didn't necessarily want
Right.
concrete, ugly barriers, so we
We
went
could
with
paint them. They could be an art project.
It's next year. So I hear what
Yeah,
you're saying.
next year.
Lots of potential ideas.
Yeah.
This kind of thing.
I had one other thing that
Yep.
we didn't, one that none of us ever didn't mention. There was a lot of talk about the TriMet issue, TriMet bus issues that have been rerouted. I know a couple residents have concerns about it going by the roundabout and whatnot. And I know I did talk to one of the residents over there who's not a fan of the bus going by their house, but also doesn't want to see our businesses hurt any more than they already are, but would like to have an end date, you know, a certain end date at some point for that. So just for what that's worth, I did talk to somebody on that roundabout, and that was their message. So
I think that's worth a discussion, a future discussion too, because there were several of these businesses who have proposed doing this as an annual event in the summer. So this might be a bigger discussion with TriMet moving forward on bus routes in general through Old Town. I don't have anything specific. I'm not a traffic engineer, but something to look at so we're not consistently moving and things around.
right.
Excellent points. Thank you, everyone. It is important to note, as a reminder, this isn't the council action, it's a Joe action. There is no voting in work sessions. We're not voting. We're just giving our opinion and feedback, which Joe, I know, appreciates. I appreciate, yeah, Tim.
I thought I rose my hand, but I guess I didn't.
Yes.
We almost got away with it.
Damn it.
I think no, I think someone took my little hand sign down, so I had to use the hand. Just a couple of things. All the points that my peers here on council made, I wholeheartly agree with. I mean, we have to support our businesses. Joe, the mayor's right. This is your decision on moving forward, but I'll support any decision to extend this as long as possible. I also think, and before I make this last statement, I want to ask a question. Julia, they apply for a SEPA permit through us. They also have to, but they apply for a separate permit through TVF&R for the tent, correct?
So we actually applied for the SEPA permit. We, on behalf of all those businesses in Old Town, put together the SEPA, and then I honestly don't know if they applied or if that's something that Kelsey coordinated as part of the SEPA for the tents. If they had to apply.
I can answer
because it's on TVF&R's fee schedule. You know, that's like their thing.
Joe?
The reason I bring go ahead, Keith.
Answering next.
Oh, so the
Councillor
reason I
Rosner,
bring that up.
Joe has the floor.
all right. There is no permit for these size tents with TVF&R. They have changed the rules, or I believe the fire code changed. It's now 10,000 square foot tents. You can do these tents without getting a permit from the fire department, unless it's 10,000 square feet, and then you have to get a permit. So it was done through our SEPA. There's standards that we always pass on to the businesses and things like that, but there is no separate tent permit from TVF&R.
Awesome. So Tim, you had other comments you want to make?
So my only other comment is, and I'll go back to this, Joe, this is your call. As I said, you know, I'll support, you know, anything we can do to extend this as long as possible for these businesses. I will say, though, that it's a pandemic, to echo what Sean said. These are highly unusual times. These 180-day rule was put into a place contemplating a different paradigm of operation. And whatever we can do to partner with Portland and Beaverton and the other cities that are going to run up against this to get a temporary moratorium on that from the state or the governor as appropriate, we should do. And if you need help from us, the electeds, to help lobby along those lines, let us know, because to me it's a no-brainer that they extend that time frame, as long as we're being safe, we're not creating a fire hazard or putting heaters under, in the wrong place and those types of things. It just seems like a no-brainer, just like we did a moratorium on evictions. It seems a no-brainer in these times. So however we can help as electeds to help lobby the right agencies to get some movement on that, let us know.
It's clear. Thanks, Tim. I think it's clear we're now almost at 6 months into this great pandemic, and the whole 180-day rule law is just now popping up. So they probably hadn't even thought about it the last couple months, and so now it's before us. So hopefully they will be in agreement from their perspective, and we'll figure it out. I think it's if Joe, and I also support whatever extension Joe, right now till Thanksgiving-ish, it will also give us time to, folks do want to come out and support these businesses in the cold weather. I hope they do, but if they're not able to put heaters in there that are adequate because of fire code, there just might not be that much of a crowd. Now they'll support other ways, and maybe one of the restaurants might ask their landlord to be able to use their lobby at night. There's at least 2 restaurants that could do that, or restaurant bars. One of the landlords being Sherwood, in the event that outside just isn't feasible because of heaters and temperatures and all that. And then, because we are, to a person, very supportive of wanting everyone to succeed, and be it in Old Town or anywhere in town, just like how aggressive we were with grants, pretty much every one of these businesses that we are talking about, directly or indirectly, have received. We've given out lots of grants and support of them, both our initial grant from city reserves to then the CARES money that we got to allocate as well. So we are doing, I think, more than the vast majority of cities in Oregon for our businesses, and I'm very proud of that.
So Keith, if I can just throw one more thing in here too, is I would like to, and I know we're throwing a lot at Julia and Joe and everybody tonight to do some research on this and find out what we can do, and if we can extend to November, that's great. But I think we owe it to these businesses and the employees of these businesses as well to try and come to a decision on whether we can or can't extend past that, probably as soon as possible, because we did hear from several businesses that this could affect employment for their employees. And so I don't want to wait until, a 1 week before the deadline and say, sorry, we couldn't help you, and put some people out on the street. So I think, the sooner we can come to a good understanding on this, it just really does benefit employers and employees to put their house in order.
Yep. So Joe, so you gotten some feedback. We've gotten the report. Do you have any plans yet?
Yes. So I think obviously we heard from the community over the last few days, overwhelmingly positive to try to find a way to extend this. Your input tonight's very important. I think it's almost a no-brainer for me to extend it to November 27th, to that 180 days, because we can do that legally. The question then becomes, is there any possibility through some other route to get that looked at? That's not just a Sherwood issue. I've heard that. We can work on that. So I know there's folks watching this at home that are very interested. So publicly, I would state I'm very supportive of extending to November 27th and continuing to work on this issue related to the fire code. And
Joe, you might want to give Tess to CFM a call, see if they can help at all.
And I appreciate all the comments and the input that was provided tonight. So it is, as the mayor said, very valuable in my decision making. So
I suspect TDFNR might have already caught wind of this as well. I mean, we have lots of TDFNR folks in our own community who may be beginning the conversation, and maybe we can get an answer sooner than later. So
correct.
Awesome. Right, we're at 48 hours, 56 hours from, kind of a look at it.
Social media, so. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Anything else, Joe?
Nope, not on this issue. I appreciate everyone's input. So.
Awesome.
And I know tonight went a little longer than expected, so I appreciate that as well.
Thanks, Joe, and big thanks to Julia for putting together this last-minute presentation and getting us all up to speed.
And of course, our amazing Bruce. He was instrumental in going out and talking with people and taking the pictures that you saw in the presentation.
Oh, thank you, Bruce.
Yes, thank you for not using stock photos.
Good job.
I'm sure he appreciates all the times that we throw things on his lap last minute. He probably had his Monday and Tuesday completely planned differently this week, but.
Yes, unlike myself, who follows social media here in town, Bruce had no clue Monday morning when this all kind of started, and we started the Monday morning, and his Monday has definitely changed in terms of his plans. So always flexible, which we appreciate.
Bruce, I say don't start social media, Bruce. Just
no, whatever we can do to help business. So, thank you.
Hey, did you guys notice that I didn't freeze this time?
Why? Oh, what's different?
We got a new router.
Oh, you sound so much better.
Excellent.
So yeah.
Good.
Now we just need to get Tim to change his ringtone and make it less loud.
That ringtone wakes me up at night.
It woke us up here too.
I thought the mayor's apartment was on fire.
There is a mute button on everybody's phone.
Well, it doesn't help when you drop the mouse and you can't click on the little mute button on there. So,
so just as a reminder, the next time we collectively are together will be on November 17th, and the election will be done, and the world will be who knows what the world will be like in a month. So
different, it might not.
Exactly.
So, as we've said many times before, everyone has their ballots. If they haven't already voted, be sure to vote. Remind your spouse, your parents, your adult-age children and cousins and friends, neighbors to vote. It's important. I think there'll be a record turnout this fall from coast to coast, from corner to corner.
Yep.
So.
And if your college-age student got their ballot at college and also got a ballot at your home residence, they can only vote once.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They'll catch it.
Except in Chicago.
Early vote often.
Awesome. So with that, we are adjourned, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night.